All right, welcome. I don't know if this is good to be after lunch or not. Did everyone have a good lunch? Awesome. And a great keynote, right? Awesome keynote. All right, my name is Brett Miller. I am a AWS person that's been working on a new pattern in AWS for the last 4 years. It came across as a lot of different requests from customers alike, from commercial sectors to public sector. And everyone said the almost exact same thing. They want to have compliance and governance made easier, right? They want to automate it. They don't want to have a lot of manual processes. Can everyone relate to that, I hope? Say amen, right? Amen. Awesome. So what we've been doing is working on a different approach. It's a much different approach that you haven't seen before. It's based on a lot of things we've done internally in the way that we manage our cloud here at AWS, but also took a lot of customer requirements that we see over and over again across our public sector. Here with me, I have Ray Obrien from NASA that's going to talk a little bit about NASA's challenges as they've gone on their cloud journey around governance. We also have Kaushik Mahani here from AWS Service Catalog that's going to discuss how you can use AWS Service Catalog along with partner products, cloudtamerio, to provide holistic and automated governance that scales infinitely. And that's one of the key takeaways. We want to help everyone be able to scale from one account all the way to thousands of accounts and have the automation to ensure you're not being hamstrung by labor-intensive processes. All right, so I'm going to go over a little bit of what governance at scale is. Then we're going to go into, Ray is going to talk a little bit about the NASA challenges they've had specifically over the 6 years and how they're addressing them to go forward. A lot of these things I believe will relate in some of your own journeys that you are going through as you move faster and faster to AWS. Next, we're going to have Brian Price from Stratus Solutions come up and talk about a brand new product that's being released here in the summit that has taken all of our ideas around governance and scale and implements them into a tool that's really easy to use for technical and non-technical folks alike. And then Kaushik Mahani is going to come up here and talk a little about how you can use a service catalog along with cloudtamerio to provide really holistic governance for the complete enterprise so you can scale very quickly with confidence into AWS. So let's talk a little about governance at scale and what is it? Why do you care, right? You probably care about governance at scale because you're probably getting more and more accounts as you go into AWS. Who has more than one AWS account, right? Who has more than 5, 10? Governance can be challenging if you try to use manual approaches to maintain consistency or fiscal responsibilities and budgets as you grow into the cloud. Has anyone seen those types of challenges in their own environments? Probably. And we don't have a really good message consistently across the industry on how to do that. We are attempting to do that with governance at scale. But the whole idea is to be able to use automation to provision accounts, provide accounts, baseline accounts, and even do things like budget enforcements in AWS in a proactive manner, regardless if you have 1 or 100 accounts. So what does enterprise governance really mean? It's an overused term. It's been used for a long time. We actually took a very specific focus to governance. We saw the same types of questions being asked by customers, and we focused all of our efforts over the last 3 years to help address a lot of these things that we've seen through a lot of our customer engagements. A lot of customers ask, how do I determine who has access to what data and what systems across my entire enterprise? I don't want to have to go talk to a developer to do that. I want to have the automation tell me. And it needs to be in real time so I can make better risk-based decisions. Other one is, how do I make sure that all of my folks and projects and organizational units can adhere to IT budgets? Right? This one really gets a lot of people nervous in a pay-per-use model. They're always afraid that people are going to overspend money that they haven't been allocated from. And lastly, we want to make sure that regardless of how many accounts you have, you can actually maintain compliant to any relevant third-party framework. It could be HIPAA, it could be PCI, it could be NIST. The whole idea is to make an easy-to-use, infinitely scalable system that can do all 3 things. And we're going to talk a lot about that. So governance and cloud governance is not a new subject. It's been around for years, ever since AWS started. But we're taking a much different approach to doing governance. A lot of the traditional approaches you see commonly out in the marketplace tend to want to put a piece of software between the users and the cloud providers, right? So you don't interact with the cloud. You interact with a third-party provider or a software shim, and then that interacts with the cloud. A lot of these were really popular back 5 or 6 years ago. They were really popular, especially for non-technical users that just needed basic services. You needed an EC2 instance. You needed S3. But as you wanted to gain more services and higher level services, a lot of these software shims had a really hard time keeping up. So a lot of developers were asking for things that couldn't be done or had to be written. So we took a different approach. We said, what happened if you could give an AWS account to every person in your entire enterprise? One customer is going to scale it up. They want to scale something like this to 40,000 accounts. But you have to have all the automation to make it work. We believe you don't put a shim in front of the user, you actually provide AWS accounts at scale and then have management platforms manage the security and the compliance and the fiscal guardrails of each individual account that aligns to an organization. Oops. All right. So, why do you want to do automated governance? Well, one of the big reasons you would want to do it is because you got to keep up with demand. In the beginning, when you're actually going into the cloud first, a lot of pioneers can use spreadsheets to manage governance. But as you start accelerating and your entire enterprise wants to move in, it becomes very challenging to actually use manual-based processes like spreadsheets to look at budgets, to look at security controls. So you have to replace a lot of the manual methods you would use in a traditional approach to do it much different as you go faster into the cloud. So what challenges exist in your organization? Every organization is different, but we found 3 main themes with customers and their challenges around governance. And we try to focus all of our efforts to helping fix 3 major buckets of questions and challenges. The first one is account management. We've heard that customers want to align their entire organization to their cloud operations. They want to make it familiar. Right? They don't want to treat cloud differently. If they have a very deep organization, they want to be able to put all of their cloud operations in the appropriate organizational tree and then push policies hierarchically. And what I mean by policies, it could be security or IT policies, or it could be even fiscal policies. And they also want it to be very easy to use and very visual. Right? A lot of CIOs said, we don't want to call a developer to run a report. We want to have a visualized interface to do it. So we've helped create a lot of the mechanisms and blueprints that you guys can use to build your own systems that can meet a lot of these principles of governance at scale. Cost enforcement. Does anyone get nervous about overruns of cost in the cloud? Probably some of us, right? Especially in public sector. We encourage people to use a lot of automation to do this as well. So if you align your accounts to your organization, you can actually push fiscal policies that can make sure people don't do cost overruns. And thirdly, if you align your accounts in the proper way and have automated guardrails, you can actually help accelerate your security authorizations, because you can always ensure that all the configurations that are being used in 1, 10, 50, 1,000 accounts are consistent to enterprise policies. And they can always be reported in a very easy way. So the key to doing governance at scale is to align your organization with your cloud operations and then have the automation to be able to push any type of policy downward into the AWS accounts. But the other thing it enables you to do is gives your business units a lot of autonomy, right? And that's key. You want to centralize some of your governance, but you want to distribute that authority across your business units. And if you do it right, you can allow your sub-business units to do whatever they need to do as long as it's conformant, but also maintain visibility of those environments as you automate those policies downward in your organization. So what does this actually look like? This was actually written up on a whiteboard in one of our customers. They say, we want this. This is the holy grail. We want to have an interface that can map out our entire organization, and we can control fiscal policies, budgets, security and compliance through a common interface that the entire organization can rally around. So we did everything in our power to help build these types of interfaces. So, and we believe by the feedback we've received so far that customers can build this for themselves. They can build these common interfaces then that can automatically align AWS accounts to their organization and be able to push budgets from the higher level organization all the way down to the business units, all the way down to the AWS accounts. And everything is automated. That's the beauty of all this. Beauty of governance at scale is to automate everything, including all of your proactive budget enforcement pieces. So a manager or director can actually mandate that a certain account cannot go over a certain amount of money, and the automation is in the back to ensure that happens. If a manager needs more money to allocate to a specific project, he doesn't have to go through some third-party framework. He goes into the tool. If he has money available in his budget, he can then align it to different projects. The whole idea is to be able to scale infinitely and release a lot of your manual processes. All right, account management at scale. You've probably heard of AWS organizations, right? AWS organization is a key AWS service that can help you align your organizations to your AWS accounts. That's critical in making all this actually work. If you want to provision new accounts, you can use AWS organizations to do so. If you want to do federation, you can federate using some of our common services from a common Active Directory into an AWS portal like I showed you just a few minutes ago, and then allow people to very easily acquire the services they need to be successful, but also have all the governance that's automated from the top all the way to the bottom. Cost enforcement at scale. We spent a lot of time over this over the last few years. At scale, if you want to apply budgets to your AWS account, you have to do it in real time. Right? You have to look at almost every API call that's going in there and make judgment calls on how that is going to impact the overall budget of that organization or that AWS account. And you can use things like CloudWatch. You can also use things like CloudTrail to look at every API call that's written in an account and then project the impact of those APIs against the budget that they've been approved. That really works. And you're going to see an operating product in a few minutes of how that is all implemented within a partner product. Compliance automation at scale, right? We always want to make the ATOs go faster, and we don't want to put as much effort into writing documentation. We found that if you take an automated system where you can hierarchically place policies to ensure conformity, there's a lot of benefits that will reduce the RMF efforts and the reporting of all of your individual AWS accounts throughout your organization. We've had a lot of success using products like Telos Exacta and plumb them into individual accounts. So no matter if you have 1 account, 10 account, 100 account, or 1,000 accounts, you can have things like Telos Exacta report on the operating configurations of those accounts and automatically generate a lot of documentation for your auditors or your risk acceptance officials. So we encourage you to look at products like that you can easily plumb into an automated system to automate a lot of your ATO process and really reduce the amount of time it takes to go to mission. So where do I go from here? So governance at scale is a pattern that we've developed that gives you kind of a map and a compass to really automate all of your cloud environments at scale, right? We encourage you to use a pattern like this and to build something for yourself. If you need help, there's solutions architects on all of our sales teams. There's professional services that have built these types of systems for other customers around commercial and public sector. But what you're going to see is today, if you don't want to build your own, or if that's not the ROI that you want, you can look at our partner ecosystem. And the one that we've worked with very closely is cloudtamerio to do this at scale. That's done it in a couple public sector customer spaces. But what I did right now is wanted to hand it over to Ray Obrien from NASA. Ray Obrien from NASA has a very unique perspective because they have been in the cloud as one of the longest customers in AWS public sector. And they've had to deal with a lot of the governance challenges getting here. And he's going to tell you some of the things you should look out for and some of the things you should think of when you try to automate governance inside of AWS as you scale to get bigger and bigger. So here you go, Ray.
Right. Thank you, Brett. Hello, my name is Ray Obrien. I'm the NASA Service Manager for Enterprise Managed Cloud Computing. I work at NASA Ames Research Center located near San Francisco, California. And title of my short segment is NASA Cloud Governance, Rethinking, Repositioning, and Retooling to Meet Rapidly Growing Demand. I want to start out by telling you about my reaction the first time I learned about infrastructure as a service. I remember reading about it, looking at the many NIST definitions as they became refined, then finally seeing some industry implementations of infrastructure as a service, including AWS. And I remember thinking, wow, this is amazing. This is totally going to change the way NASA computes. And I went around telling everybody, and still do, that's exactly what's going to happen. This is going to change the way many people, acquire and use computational resources around the agency. And, many missions and projects have an almost insatiable need for those types of resources. But the neat thing is, it's actually happening. I can see it happening several years later, and I don't think it's going to stop. And so my team is in charge of, facilitating agency adoption of cloud computing and applying governance, putting up the guardrails. And we've learned a few things over the past few years and that are relevant to this session, and I want to share those with you, and then I'll pass it off to next speaker. So today's presentation, I'm going to tell you about the NASA approach for meeting enterprise class requirements for the use of IaaS, how we developed an initial operating capability for the agency use and where we are today, and then a couple very relevant growing pains, and then how we're rethinking, repositioning to move forward. Let's see. Okay, so it's been said many times that when a cloud provider tells you they're enterprise ready, they're enterprise class, that's kind of the end state for them and the beginning state for you as an enterprise. And especially at the IaaS level, that's a shared responsibility model. You've heard Amazon say that over and over again. And what you don't want is everyone, NASA's a 50,000 plus person organization, everyone having to deal with these requirements on their own. Because first of all, it would be very inefficient, and it would be done inconsistently. And the third thing, though, and I think most important, is many things are daunting. People that want to use computational resources, they had to deal with all these things on their own. They'd probably say, hey, this cloud model, it sounds really good, but turn the page and see what you got to deal with. And they'd either go down their normal path, traditional computing path, or maybe they'd start to use these services without addressing some of these needs, which would be kind of more of a nightmare from a governance perspective. So, in a nutshell, our enterprise approach is to do the heavy lifting where we can on behalf of the NASA workforce and NASA projects and missions so they can focus on their job, their mission, and using the compute resources, not so much dealing with most of these. I'll give you 4 examples of what we do. One is when it comes to FedRAMP, NASA continually tries to be very aligned with FedRAMP. We have developed our own internal NASA FedRAMP aligned processes for looking at FedRAMP packages and issuing provisionals ATOs. We do those once, and everyone else can leverage those. And I do want to say that I'm very proud that a member of our team last week received one of 5 FedRAMP awards. FedRAMP is 6 years old, and they had a recognition ceremony. They selected someone on the NASA Cloud team to recognize them for having, largest agency impact. This person on our team really made contributions, not only to NASA but to the, to the FedRAMP initiative to, put a process in place that the federal government could follow. And he did a lot of those contributions, or made those contributions, supporting NASA's path to the cloud. The second thing we do is for many use cases, we want to connect to the cloud providers, at a network level, connect the NASA networks to cloud provider networks. And we certainly don't want everyone running their own circuits and managing their own VPN connections and all those things. It would become a mess, especially the multi-account strategy. So we basically centralize that. We establish connectivity between NASA and Amazon. We manage the VPN connections. We manage capacity, performance, availability centrally. Again, everyone doesn't have to do that on their own. They can request connectivity, and we establish that based on the services we already put in place. The other big thing that we did is we put together an agency-wide acquisition vehicle for the use of AWS, and that's our plan for all cloud services. Well, it's a plan for infrastructure as a service, and wherever we can, other cloud services. That way, we can make sure we put the right NASA protections in there that are suitable for at the contractual level and terms and conditions level. And not only that, though, it positions us well because now that we own the vehicle, the governance team, we can be a central source for provisioning AWS accounts, which puts us in a really great position because then we can see everything, we know about everything. So it gives us visibility in addition to protection. So those are some examples. We do other things, but to the extent that we do those, others do not have to do that, and they can focus on using the services. Okay, so it's great to have an approach, and heavy lifting sounds really good, but we needed a plan too. We needed an implementation plan. So we came up with a 4-stage plan to maturity, and it started with an initial operating capability. Stage 1, we focused. We spent 18 months developing a framework, the interfaces, the processes, the contracts, a lot of the relationships. Talked to a lot of people about how we had to talk with contracting people to say, this is a different animal. We talked to a lot of other internal NASA service providers about what the cloud meant to them. Put that initial operating capability in place, and we've been operating with that for about 18 months. And it was great to get over that hump and be able to help people that were ready to step into the cloud. But I'd say about 12 months into it, we started to slow down because we're getting a lot of requests for demand, and we started to feel some pain. And I'm going to get into those, but and we kind of stalled for a while. And we're pivoting right now, and again, I'll explain how we're doing that. But it slowed us down, and but for the things, even though we discovered that we needed to do a few things different, I can't overemphasize the importance of getting started early. Had we not started, we wouldn't have learned all the good things. We would learn about all the things that do work well, but most important, we probably wouldn't have been able to accommodate early adopters within NASA. And if you attend some other NASA or some other sessions at this conference, you'll see NASA presenting at many. Those are the early adopters. Those are the people that went in early, and the way it turns out is it's not really only the cloud capabilities and services that are going to change the way NASA computes. It's the project and missions that learn how to leverage that and pave the way for others to do things similar. So I'm very thankful we started early. And not only that, if you're a team responsible for governance and that kind of thing, you're going to learn a lot from your customers. So don't wait around waiting for things to happen. Take the initiative and move forward. But eventually we wanted to move in and we would mature, extend our capability, and eventually become a well-oiled machine. But I told you we stopped. We kind of stopped in this gap between 2 and 3, and I'll get into why that happened next. Okay, so growing pain number 1. So when we started out facilitating the path to the cloud for NASA, about 5 years ago, I sent a team to reInvent. The team came back and said, oh, great, God, those are great services. We learned so much. We're so excited. But we really got to watch out for account sprawl. I went to a few of these sessions, and some people stood up and said, you got to watch out for account sprawl. We woke up one day and found out that people had been provisioning accounts with their, department credit cards, and they had hundreds or maybe thousands, and you got to watch out for that. And so naturally, what did we do? We looked at, oh, that's not going to happen to us. We're going to, that's why we attend these conferences. And we started down a path trying to minimize the number of accounts we're going to use, and we thought it was a great idea. And we went down that, and that's where we started to stall, because as we started to get more people, trying to put them in one account, it's like trying to put a lot of roommates in one apartment, that kind of thing. IAM management, trying to craft policies that would keep one set of, these are infrastructure as a service level users, not end users, from stepping on each other, that became harder and harder, okay? And it became frustrating for the people that had to craft those policies. It became frustrating for the customers, the users that had to rely on those policies. And in the end, we ended up having to tell many of them, open a ticket with us, we'll do it for you, because we don't want to give you that capability because you might inadvertently do something to someone else. Same with project chargeback, we as one of our enterprise services, build back, chargeback, show back reports. We produce those reports. Trying to develop those reports just became hard in one account. Sure, everyone tags just perfectly, right? Well, they don't. And in a second, even if they did, there are many services that you can't get tagged. So you end up having to have business rules to allocate costs, which can be very complicated. And even though there's breadcrumbs and you can go maybe find some way to charge back. It's a lot of work. Just has continued to slow us down. And finally, security administration, similar to the IAM management, you want to keep people from stepping on each other. But like I said before, the one thing I worried about is one account, a lot of stuff in it, a compromise or breach. It could be a really bad day if we can't figure out exactly what went wrong and just had to assume things were affected that maybe we couldn't prove either way and have to reconstitute. That would have not been good. We went to Amazon and said, hey, can you provide us some isolation mechanisms? Can you do something to help us? Other customers did the same thing. Amazon or AWS even started up a project. I think they called it Compartments. Talked about it for a little, and then we didn't hear much. It never saw the light of day. But around that time, Organizations was announced, and you started hearing the multi-account strategy thing over and over again from folks like Brett. And it was clear that Amazon was going down a multi-account path. So about 9 months ago, that's what we did. And so I went from probably about 5, 7, 10 accounts to 9 months over 100. And sometimes we're provisioning them in batches. So we solved the original, or we addressed the original problem to a large extent. It's something really nice about being able to encapsulate workloads, applications, people groups in accounts. But we created another set of challenges, and that is account inventory management. Brett talked about worksheets. Worksheets don't cut it. You get to the point, it's only as good as people updating them. And if people are busy doing other things, they don't update them. You really need a more real-time view into your account universe. There's a little slide up, somebody might have seen it when you walked in and said, did you know that in 48 hours, one Amazon account can accumulate $800,000 worth of spend? That's amazing. That kind of stuff worries me. And I view all these little accounts as little checkbooks, and NASA does not have, overdraft protection. So, and AWS provides some mechanisms for watching that, but at the end of the day, there's no hard stop. We need to have some way to say, hits this, stop it. And they'll deal with those consequences, but not the other ones. I want to go, talk to resources and budget people about how we spent money we didn't have. And then, now instead of people in one account, kind of keep them stepping on them, we've got lots of users, actually lots of resources, lots of different accounts, lots of policies to manage. That gets harder. Configuration control for accounts if you want to maintain a baseline, that gets harder. So all these things are new challenges, but we are moving forward. We're using multi-account strategy, following a multi-account strategy, we're moving forward here. And you're going to hear in a second about a tool that helps to deal with probably, I think, every one of these problems. So moving forward, so we are making the transition from, I don't know about this multi-account thing, to fully embracing it. I mean, it has some definite advantages. And we're going to retool also. And here's where we're going to start. The most popular tool I've read about, the most popular cloud management tool I've read about is the do-it-yourself tool. And just about everyone starts out down that path, doesn't scale, becomes a lot of work to maintain those tools. We're probably going to really minimize our use of those. And the industry's mature enough where these tools are out there. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our tools we purchased earlier. We've outgrown some of them haven't kept up. Third thing we're going to do is we're not going to rely as much on our traditional data center tools because there's a lot of new types of services in these cloud environments. And the cloud providers, their cloud native tools are very good. They're delivering a lot of them. And who knows their services better than the people that produce the services. So a lot more reliance on those. But when it makes sense and we can complement the cloud native tools, we're going to rely on third-party tools to address our challenges. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Brian, because he's going to tell you about one that we're evaluating right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Ray. Really appreciate that insight. It's always helpful, I find, to learn a lot more about what customers are experiencing and some of the things that we've really seen firsthand across a lot of our customers. So quick bit of background. So I'm Brian Price. I'm with Stratus Solutions. So we're an advanced AWS consulting partner. And I want to tell you a little bit about the story of our company to give context about cloudtamerio and why it's really, we think, a game-changing solution for a lot of organizations to be able to apply some of these governance and scale best practices in a simple-to-use solution. So historically, we've been a professional services-based company, and we've helped a lot of customers migrate workloads to the cloud at scale. And we've seen some common challenges just happen over and over again. And about, I guess, 2 years ago, one of the customers that we share with AWS came to us, and they kind of came to us with a problem. They said, we want to give 30,000 developers access to AWS, but we don't want to have to micromanage everything. We just want to give them the control to govern themselves. What could go wrong, right? So we started to think about this problem, and with AWS, learning about how AWS themselves manages the tens of thousands of accounts that AWS uses, we embarked on this path of building a solution, which is today cloudtamerio, that we're announcing for general availability here at Public Sector Summit. So a little bit about the product. The goal of cloudtamerio is to provide a couple capabilities that we haven't seen in traditional cloud management and cloud governance solutions. One of which is to provide a mechanism to enforce fiscal and compliance policies. So what Ray was describing before, the thing that keeps him up at night of that account that's overspending budgets, we have mechanisms in our product that actually can stop spending from happening in an account when certain thresholds are set, which is a really powerful feature we've seen a lot of customers be able to use to answer compliance with acts like the Anti-Deficiency Act that most of our federal customers have to comply with. The other thing that's unique about our approach is we don't use this cloud broker approach that Brett described earlier. We provide native access to the AWS console, CLI, APIs, so that users that come from any organization that are experienced with AWS get those native tools at their fingertips, but in a way that's much easier for the organization. And it's a unique balance that we're trying to strike, where we're giving technical staff the resources they want and the time frame they want, but also giving leadership that visibility and control that they need to feel safe and secure in moving to the cloud. So I'll talk a little bit about our three core features: account management, budget enforcement, and compliance automation, a little bit more in depth. So fundamentally, as Brett described, one of the things that we heard over and over from customers is they want to be able to see alignment of all the accounts and resources to something that makes sense. And their organizational hierarchies usually make pretty much sense in the way they operate the rest of the business in their organization. So what we do is make it really easy for organizations to be able to do that. We model and can support any breadth or depth of an organization that really makes sense for the way the business works. We also try to automate common cloud management tasks. We have self-service workflows built into the product itself that helps customers be able to quickly request new accounts, get access to different projects without that cloud PMO or central cloud management office to be really involved into doing some of these routine tasks. And that means that those people can be focusing on innovation, not just replication. And then to make it super simple for when people want to get access to their AWS accounts, we tie into single sign-on providers through Active Directory, SAML, and some other providers, and can enhance that with MFA so that an organization can feel much more confident, much more secure that they're getting access to cloud in an easy-to-use and consumable fashion. From a budget enforcement perspective, a couple key things that we've seen over and over again. Organizations want to take funding and they want to allocate it through that hierarchy, but they want visibility of not just what's being spent, but also what's being planned across their organization. And so we model cloudtamerio's budget enforcement kind of features to provide just that. We allow you to create any number of funding sources. We found in the federal government, money is all sorts of different colors with periods of performance, different use cases. You can use funding for one project for this, but others you can't. And at the end of the month, when you get an AWS bill, you look at it and you're like, well, it just tells me what my total is. I don't have a breakdown of where do I pay certain bits of that bill from what sources of funding. And so with cloudtamerio, you can create different funding sources, allocate those as you need across your organization. At the end of the month, we do all the hard work and give you that report that you need to see about how much money you pay your bill from with different funding sources. We also tie into AWS services to provide more real near-time reporting for cloud spend. By default, AWS provides billing information on a 12-hour basis. It's a great starting point, but as Ray mentioned, $800,000 can be accrued in a 48-hour period, right? So that's a considerable risk that organizations really need to kind of consider. So we tie into different services natively and get a more estimated current spend within their organization. And then based on the fact that we have this information about planned amounts and based on the fact that we have actual real information around spend, we can also provide budget enforcement actions that are configurable on a project-by-project basis to not just notify, but also take more intrusive actions like freezing spend extend, so preventing people from being able to create new resources when a threshold's reached, or terminating resources within a project account. You probably don't want to turn that on to your production environment, but for sandbox accounts, for development accounts that you've got a CI/CD process that's going to rebuild the environment overnight, why not, right? That reduces that risk of an incident happening, and from a financial perspective, the impact, making it a lot less. And then from a compliance automation perspective, what we really are doing here with that hierarchy is applying different policies and procedures to be able to map an organization's level of restrictions they need to apply in their entire environment and tailor it across that hierarchy. So we take AWS IAM policies, CloudFormation templates, and we combine them together into something known as cloud rules. And these cloud rules, think of it as this is what governs what people can and can't do in the cloud. The great thing about them is they're inheritable too. So at the very top, the CEO can set a cloud rule to do something. The VP underneath of them at that senior leadership level can set one to maybe handle from a financial perspective. And then they all get aggregated down to the individual project level. We also allow workflows, so when you have that one team that always comes up and says, that doesn't work for me, I've got to have an exemption. Instead of having to go to that cloud management, cloud PMO office and work with some special use cases, we allow a workflow built into the tool to allow people to request and then get approved access. But more importantly, when you need to make those changes across your entire environment, when AWS decides, okay, we're going to add 5 new services, or they've just approved for FedRAMP moderate, 20 new services, you can make that change in one place and have it affected across your entire organization. As Brett alluded to, one of the other AWS partners here is Telos. They make a product called Exacta. And one of the very interesting integrations that we've done to help customers accelerate their ATO process, while CloudTamer helps to provide these boundaries for an organization to stay within, we allow and we work with Exacta to be able to take those boundaries and report against what's actually going on. And what Exacta can do is be able to generate the accreditation documents, validate the state of compliance within the AWS account. So it can really help accelerate the overall compliance process. I'll explain a little bit more about how these cloud rules work really briefly. So I've just put an example together where we've got a company that's putting a policy to restrict non-US regions, a department that's going to provide a policy to enforce the use of a certain type of EC2 instance because maybe they made a reserved instance bulk buy, and then a program policy to use FedRAMP high services. So if a user comes into CloudTamer and they want to go to AWS and create an M4 extra large EC2 instance in GovCloud, the first policy check, GovCloud is a US region, so they're approved at that level. When we kind of go to the next level, the department policy to be able to use M4 extra large instances is obviously approved. And then they want to use EC2 in GovCloud, which is actually approved for processing FedRAMP high data. So all of a sudden, CloudTamer will allow that user to be able to perform that action. On the other hand, if we just make one small tweak, right, we have that user go into a commercial region accounts, let's say US East 1. Well, those first 2 policies, they work fine. But EC2 running in US East 1 is only FedRAMP moderate, it's not FedRAMP high. So when that user then goes through CloudTamer to be able to get access, those boundaries are really established, and it's a really nice way for organizations to ensure consistency across their organization. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kaushik Mohanty, who's going to talk a little bit about Service Catalog and one of the exciting integrations that we're really proud about today that we're working with their team, showing how you combine some of the things that Ray has talked about, taking native AWS tooling along with some partner products and really bringing them together into a nice integrated solution.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, sorry. Went a little too fast. Okay. So you heard about account orchestration, mapping to organizational hierarchies. You also heard about account management and compliance so far. What Service Catalog does and complements what you've heard so far to give an end-to-end governance at scale solution is your ability to deploy standardized products and groups of products, which we call portfolios, targeted at user groups in a manner whereby they could access those products in a self-service portal which is made consistent with the organization's logos and color patterns, whatever, so that they get that soothing feel for accessing AWS workloads and are able to deploy those workloads which are provisioned through Service Catalog. Essentially, Service Catalog bridges the gap between organizations and developers. Or by organizations, I mean the configurators that work with the lines of businesses as well as the user communities, developers, which would be developers or testers or prod users, to understand what their needs are. The security folks that want to make sure that once something is made compliant with the norms of the organization, the security posture doesn't change throughout the project life cycle. And the operations folks who want to make sure that once workloads are deployed on the cloud, there is seamless integration with other aspects, be it ITSM, like ServiceNow or BMC, and there is seamless integration with even operations if an account is managed as an AWS, Amazon Managed Services account, AMS account. That offers you standardization, governance, and control. Few things that I would like to bring out here is the way Service Catalog does it is by separating the end user from the AWS console. So once something is deployed as a provisioned product from Service Catalog, the end user just gets a portal interface whereby they click on the products that they have access to, and those products are provisioned down to the end users, and they use them. They don't have to worry about the underlying VPC or subnet that is needed to be configured before they are able to access a product. The second thing I wanted to bring out is Service Catalog addresses a very wide spectrum of what could be deployed on the AWS cloud. That ranges from AWS services, marketplace software. It also covers custom applications that could be wrapped up in CloudFormation and app stacks. Once products get categorized as products to be ingested into Service Catalog clusters them as portfolios. And that enables standardized deployments because you define those portfolios using these configurators in such a way that they are addressing specific needs of different user groups. The lines of businesses or data scientists, for example, on the other side of this chart do not need to know what has gone into building their products and provision products. If they need enhancement to those, it's a simple request to the administrator to launch a new version of the portfolio that could have a completely different set of products. All of that drives automation, enables DevOps, and most of all, that one, okay, yeah. Enables these use cases. The ones that I have mentioned here, I mean, there are 6 of those, but I'll talk about the 4. Predominantly with provisioning, help, with version control, like I spoke about, different sets of portfolios that get launched to address seasonality requirements or change in requirements of the user groups. Self-service portal as a one-stop shop for you to basically get your provision products on one click, and enforcing governance and compliance proactively. These are the components of Service Catalog that have integrated exceedingly well with cloudtamerio, and that's the solution we are talking about. And with that, let me roll the video which talks about this integration and the end-to-end governance at scale solution. Sorry.
As you rapidly move more applications and workloads to the cloud, applying traditional IT governance practices becomes more difficult. With the increase in cloud adoption, it becomes increasingly time-consuming to provision cloud accounts and deliver services. And it's hard to answer important questions like, who has access to which accounts? How much is each account spending? And are my accounts in compliance with standards like HIPAA and PCI? As a result of these challenges and questions, either adoption stalls while traditional processes are adapted to the cloud, or you are forced to accept increased financial, security, and compliance risk. Governance at Scale is an AWS best practice that you can leverage to apply IT governance strategies in the cloud to achieve agility, compliance, and cost savings at scale. Native AWS services, like AWS Service Catalog, are part of this best practice. But many organizations may have hundreds of accounts and thousands of users that require access to cloud resources. Enabling governance controls for deploying services has traditionally required time and labor. AWS partner products like cloudtamerio help organizations implement governance at scale best practices in a single automated solution, reducing the time and labor required to bring together these native services to help with easy orchestration and application across your organization. Let's take a look at a typical day in the life of a project team before implementing governance at scale. You have a project team that is new to the cloud. This team needs access to a new account to migrate a healthcare web application to AWS. The team submits a service desk ticket to get the account created, and they wait. Meanwhile, the cloud management team uses mostly manual processes to provision the requested account, and the time and complexity increase as more workloads are required. Finally, the project team gets access to the empty account, but there are access limitations and they have questions. How do we apply the right combination of AWS services to migrate this workload? Should we use RDS or DynamoDB for the database? The project team reviews documentation to learn more. Despite this, they end up using some services and configurations that violate HIPAA policies. And one team member inadvertently checks in API keys to GitHub. These are then used for a Bitcoin mining operation. Cost overruns follow. Now, let's take a look at the increased efficiency, compliance, and security provided through governance at scale using Service Catalog and cloudtamerio. Your team uses cloudtamerio to request a new project. The project is approved with a limited budget. cloudtamerio immediately begins using automated and consistent processes to provision the cloud account. Account created. Networking setup. AMIs and Service Catalog portfolios shared, all based on where the project lives in your organization hierarchy. Within minutes, your project team has an account with the right safeguards and boundaries to ensure security and budget compliance. Cloud access roles are created to limit the access rights of certain user groups. Novice cloud users receive limited permissions. AWS Service Catalog portfolios are shared with the newly provisioned account and user groups. These portfolios allow the organization to provide users a simple-to-use interface to deploy products in a standardized, compliant, and secure manner. As an example, here's a 3-tier web application that deploys presentation, application, and data subnet. AWS Service Catalog can configure security groups and instantiate EC2 and RDS instances to host Nginx and MySQL in a manner approved for processing PHI data to comply with HIPAA. Behind the scenes, these portfolios use CloudFormation to allow consistent, repeatable setup across the organization. The team focuses on migrating the application, not the details of the AWS architecture. And if a situation occurs where API keys are checked into GitHub, cloudtamerio provides the financial enforcement to limit spending based on a specified budget threshold. When updates are required for a new version of core software or to add or remove an AWS service, you can update the Service Catalog product to ensure new resources are created with the latest approved versions. Then, cloudtamerio propagates this updated product configuration across your organization hierarchy, freeing your team from burdensome and repetitive tasks. The process has gone from weeks to hours, saving dollars and allowing the team to focus on delivering value. Governance at Scale, Service Catalog, and cloudtamerio, a combination that gives you greater agility, delivers compliance and security, and ensures you get the full ROI of the cloud.
Pretty cool, right? All right, we have about 30 seconds left. I just wanted to leave you with some tidbits of knowledge as you partake into your cloud journey. Try to automate as much as you possibly can, right? Automation is the key to success in Amazon. Do as much high-level automation around governance, security and compliance, cost enforcement. Align your accounts to your organizational hierarchy because that provides a familiar interface for your constituents to understand how to apply policies. And once again, if you need any help, please reach out to your solutions architects or professional services to help you build your own governance at scale solution, or talk to these guys in booth 251. We hope that this pattern catches on and that people can use it in order to scale from one accounts to even tens of thousands of accounts with confidence. Thank you very much.